Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Drive Pink Dialogue. And it's our final episode before we can finally get back into games for Inter Miami. What an exciting time we are about to enter after I don't know how you felt, but for me, a very long 2 weeks that was Inter Miami lists. How you feeling today, man?
It feels like it's been a long while since I've heard you give that introduction. When it's only been 5 days, but it's been a boring week, man. I want Inter Miami to come back and play again because we need to talk about stuff. Otherwise, it's nice and sunny here in DC. I'm enjoying the weather. I'm enjoying life. No complaints as such. How have you been?
I've been good, but I think you're right. This might be the longest time we've ever had between episodes since we started, right? We did Saturday morning and then all the way to Thursday. I think this is the longest we've ever gone without recording together. Um, but let's kick into it because there's actually so much that has happened over the last 5 or 6 days, and we have a long podcast to do. And so um, let's just kick right into it. We want to start with some topical things that have happened at Inter Miami. First, the B team's playing right now, and Ian Frey is in the starting lineup. I was just catching the first 20 minutes or so. He was responsible for a really, really bad goal, or at least partially responsible. And so that was a reminder that as fun and as talented and as toolsy as he is, he still has only played about 15 professional games. But the real thing I wanted to talk about first is this mascot story. And I have a picture here of what the mascot is and what it's going to look like, allegedly. Give me your first thoughts before I sort of break down what's going on here.
That looks like a deformed Power Ranger or something because I have no clue what's going on. I'm guessing that's a heron.
That is a heron. There was an article published on June 6th by Amy Core in Muse, which kind of detailed what was happening here. And then that's where these pictures come from. But basically, Inter Miami, I guess later this year, plans on introducing this mascot to the world and to MLS and to Inter Miami fans. It was designed by an artist named Freehand Profit. So if you want to find more of his work, you can. But basically, the idea is it's all recycled material. It's very much in the conservation and sustainability ethos that Inter Miami's long tried to partner themselves with. And it sounds like you and some other people are not a huge fan of it. Tell me why you don't like this.
I mean, the idea behind it is really nice. The thought behind it is great, but visually is just not appealing. It just looks weird. It looks like a hybrid. If it were a full-on heron without the armor and stuff, I would have been perfectly fine with that. But it just seems like it's a very modern take on mascots, and it looks like half a transformer, half a Power Ranger, and half a bird. So I'm a little bit confused. Much like Kareem here, I don't know what my feelings are. Maybe it grows on me. I don't know. But hey, kudos to Inter Miami for picking this, and I don't want to disparage another person's artwork. Maybe it's maybe I'm just not seeing it.
I'll be honest, I don't hate it. I think it's fine. I know that's not like the overwhelming opinion, but I feel like most mascots, if you just show them the initial design to someone, they're going to be like, that's weird. I don't know if I like that. And then as the mascot becomes a part of the iconography and symbolism of the club, and then he's there for big moments and big wins and interacting with the fans and stuff, I think the mascot is at that point becomes iconic in a way that that people really appreciate and then turn to start really loving. So I think this is just a matter of time before we get used to it and learn to like it. But certainly you are not alone in thinking this is a scary looking mascot. For those that are just listening on audio, it's a very big plastic white head with a very big plastic pink beak. And then the rest of it is very Power Rangery. Definitely form fitting for the wearer, like a little bit of a plastic chest guard, it looks like, and maybe oversized gloves, and then some streamers hanging down the arms that are supposed to be wings. But certainly not a traditional mascot in the way we've come to think about them in America.
I will say this though, in a boxing match between the plastic heron and Gunnosaurus, I would hedge my bets against the plastic heron. Rest in peace, Gunnosaurus. For those not familiar, Gunnosaurus is the mascot for Arsenal. So, and I'm not a big fan of Arsenal, and I'd love for the heron to take him down.
It doesn't feel like, and maybe this is just me, but it doesn't feel like there's a ton of mascots in soccer, and certainly not in the MLS. And maybe just because I haven't noticed, but maybe like I don't know if this is really necessary as like a tradition, but here we are, and it's happening, and it's topical. So I thought we should touch on it. There's actually a million other things that happened this week in Inter Miami, and just to name a few of them, and because we're not going to really dive deep in any of them, but Facu Farias back on the training pitch, someone that we haven't seen since the first preseason game, and is out for the season. Looks like he's making a recovery in his route back from injury. Edison Azcona called up to the Olympic team for the Dominican Republic. I know he's on loan at the Las Vegas Lights, but still an Inter Miami player. And even if he never does come back to Inter Miami, he's still a academy product. Lots of MLS to Europe moves. Aiden Morris to Middlesbrough, which I think severely undercuts what the Columbus Crew are trying to do. And I think that's going to make it a lot easier for Inter Miami to sustain them. And I know they've already signed a replacement, but I don't think he's going to be as good as Morris, and he's not going to come for 6 weeks anyways. Julian Carranza, former Heron from the Philadelphia Union, he's not going to play Saturday. I believe he's injured, but also on his way out. I don't know, any of these you feel like you want to touch on for a second, or can I just keep going?
I think you can keep going.
Okay, Nacho, a guy that Inter Miami was attached to for a while, Real Madrid free agent now, I guess, but formerly of Real Madrid, just won the Champions League with them. Sounds like he's most likely to go the Saudi route, so that we can kind of cross that off from Inter Miami. David Ruiz scored his first goal at international level for Honduras against Bermuda on Sunday. The Bayern Munich Academy took a trip to South Florida and sort of had some scrimmages with the Inter Miami Academy. BJ Callahan sounds like he's going to be the next coach of Nashville, which is something that could be impactful for that June 29th game, which would be our final game of the season against Nashville. And then lastly, two things that I think are worth touching on, but we won't right now, are this Rafael Varane rumors, which started yesterday. We got attached to him. And then also yesterday, Lionel Messi announced that he was going to make Inter Miami the last club of his career. We're not going to talk about either of those things right now because Saur and I are going to be doing another podcast for The Heartbeat immediately after this, which will release tomorrow morning. And I encourage you all to go check it out. But basically, the two topics we'll be talking about are Messi planning to retire at Inter Miami and the Rafael Varane rumors. But I guess those are the two biggest things. So you want any sneak peeks for what everyone can expect in their podcast feed tomorrow morning?
I will say if Rafa Varane ends up coming to Inter Miami, I will wear that chicken head for one episode and would proudly parade that mascot.
I wear the mascot head.
Yeah. For one episode,
I would definitely buy it. I would definitely buy a Varane rumor jersey. He's one of my favorite center backs in like the world over the last 8 years or so. That would be like a dream come true for me. Okay, I know that was a lot of stuff, but it doesn't feel like we need to go over any of it. So I guess my last plug is, again, those are the type of things we talk about in more depth on the Heartbeat, which is a daily podcast, and you can get that in your podcast feed every morning. I'll put a link in the description if you want to check it out, but it's just a daily way to spend a little bit more time on the little stories like that. But our main topic of the day is this month we're about to go on without Lionel Messi and without Luis Suarez and potentially without Matías Rojas. Talk to me about what you think is the the most important thing that we can do, or at least the top line thought when I say we should talk about what Inter Miami needs to do over the next 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks.
Is this going to be my new
Oh,
podcast
sorry,
co-host?
I didn't even notice.
Of course you did not. Apart from that rude distraction that Scotty just put in front of my face, I think the next few games are going to be very, very crucial and a sort of a signpost in trying to understand where this Inter Miami team stands, because we still have a few question marks that we need to answer in terms of what this team is without Lionel Messi, and we're going to find out. There are a lot of players who are going to get a chance, a lot of players who are going to have to step up, and there are few key questions that we need to answer. But overall, I expect 3 points going into every game, win every game away from home, at home, come out of this stretch of games feeling very, very good about our chances to win the MLS Cup. That's what I'm hoping for. Expectations wise, I think it's going to be a bit of a bumpy ride.
Let's start with this. Lionel Messi is obviously going to be with Argentina for the Copa America, and Luis Suárez has officially been called up by Uruguay for the Copa America. So those two are confirmed. We haven't gotten final word on Matias Rojas for Paraguay, but he is with the Paraguay national team for these pre-Copa friendlies. I believe one person is going to be cut from that roster. I think they have 27. They have to get to 26. So I think there's a very, very good chance that Matias Rojas is not with us either for this 6-week stretch. My first question to you, without Rojas, without Suárez, and without Messi, how many times are we going to pull out our hair because we see a 3-5-2?
I don't think that many times. I do think, and I say that
only
famous
5 or
last
6,
words.
right?
Yeah, only 5 or 6 times. Famous last words, but I do think it's going to be okay. I think we're going to stick to the 4-3-3. How long has it been since we last saw 3-5-2? That being said, I do expect Julian Gressel to start every game. Yeah, so that's a while ago. And that was the time when we turned a corner and we've had the performances that we've had. So there is a sample size to suggest that we're definitely better in the 4-3-3, and I'm hoping that Tata Martino sees it that way. But I do expect Julian Gressel to basically start every single game. Again, I think he's been given enough of a rest. So with him in there, with maybe a couple of youngsters off the bench, I'm trying to think, Robert Taylor on the left, Campana on the strike position. Yeah, the right wing position looks a little bit weak, but I'm guessing once we have a couple of players back from injury, Redondo probably fit after this 2-week gap. Sergio Busquets, Kramaski, I think it's going to be okay. I think we're going to stick to the 4-3-3.
Okay, so here's the breakdown of how we're going to do this tonight, because the rest of this episode is just going to be talking about what the next month plus looks like without Messi, Suárez, and potentially Matias Rojas. So what are the challenges? Like, let's talk about why it's so hard to overcome the lack of Messi, because Inter Miami has really struggled to do that, even though we seemingly have a very talented roster, even when Messi's not in the lineup. Then we'll go through the schedule, break it down, how we match up, what are going to be the toughest opponents, stuff like that. We'll go through our expectations, and then we'll talk about what we want to see from this team, what we want to see from Tata Martino, what we want to see from the formations, et cetera, et cetera. And then maybe at the end, we'll give a few predictions on which players we think might stand out or maybe fall in their stock. So let's start with the challenges. Obviously, Lionel Messi is so good that he covers up a lot of your deficiencies as a team. We're not going to have him. So how are we going to score goals without Messi and without Suárez?
Tough question. I think it's going to be a low-scoring affair for the next 5, 6, 7 games, however many games we're missing Luis Suárez and Messi. But I think we're going to have to rely a lot on Leo Campana and Robert Taylor to convert some of those chances, especially if we don't have Matias Rojas as our creative outlet. It's going to be a tough ask for some of these forward players to deliver. I think a lot of these games are going to be 1-0, 2-0, or 2-1, close games where we score 1 or 2 and then try and contain the opposition from scoring. My biggest concern is that we may not be defensively strong enough to contain our opposition, and then that's going to put a lot more burden on our front line to try and score goals. And I don't think we have that many goals in us without Lionel Messi and Luis Suarez. I think we're going to have to rely on those 1-0, 2-1 victories to try and get us a result. And this is an assumption based on Matas Rojas not being available. If he's available, maybe it's a little bit better, but I'm not,
Well,
won't
and
change things drastically.
we've seen a front three of Matthias Rojas and Campana and Robert Taylor over the last couple weeks a couple of times, and it wasn't dramatically different than what it would look like without Matthias Rojas. I have a question: are we going to get a lot of Julian Gressel at right wing over the next couple of weeks?
Yeah,
Is that the
I
solution?
would think so. I don't know if that's a solution or not, but if Matas Rojas and Lionel Messi are both out, who's the other player that can play right wing? Put Chelo Wiegand in there, but then we go back to a 3-5-2.
Yeah, I think it also allows us to be a little different in the midfield in a way that I think could be really positive. So I think that's probably what we're going to see in the majority of games is a right wing spot with Gressel and then Campana and Robert Taylor centrally and on the left side. Do you feel like there's enough offensive production for Inter Miami to get the results they want, especially against the teams that they're going to be going up against?
No. I think bottom line, no. I don't think we have the same level of yes, one game Gressel got benched. And then he came off the bench and had a fantastic assist. So there's something to say about resting a player from time to time, But yeah, I'm concerned. I'm concerned about our offensive output. I don't think, as I mentioned, I don't think we have enough firepower up there to be able to outscore some of our opponents. So a lot of the reliance is going to be on having a good defense.
Yeah, and I also think the midfield is going to be crucial in both offensively and defensively if we want to get the results we want, right? We need to have more creativity from the midfield because we can't rely on Messi. But on the other hand, we also need more defensively from our midfield because we can't rely on Messi to score goals for us and just outscore opponents. So I guess I'm very worried. Why should I not be worried if I'm an Inter Miami fan?
That's a very good question. I would be worried if I was an Inter Miami fan right now. There's okay, to put a positive spin on this, you shouldn't be worried because there's a lot of talent in this team. And that was shown during our game against Vancouver, where we decided to leave behind all of our heavy hitters, except one, I think Jordi Alba started that game. But we were without most of our heavy hitters, and we probably looked the most solid I've seen us look in the last 10 games. And that was a game where we performed well throughout the 90 minutes. And it was a proper game of football where we weren't relying on the magic of Messi, or we didn't see our defense crumble too much. So there's definitely talent in this team to produce those sort of performances. I think it's going to take a couple of games for the chemistry to fit in place. The last 2 weeks were definitely important in terms of working on the training pitch, getting some of the tactics right, and figuring out who we want to play, where we want to play the players. And now it's just going to be a matter of delivering on some of those tactical adjustments that we may have seen over the last couple of weeks in the training ground. It's going to take a few games for that to kick in, but all it takes is that one performance, one good performance against a solid team, and it's going to give all of our youngsters a really, really good boost, a confidence boost that might take them through the rest of the 6 games.
Yeah, it definitely feels like there's some players that we haven't seen in a while that are going to play real roles over the next couple of weeks. Leo Afonso, a guy we haven't seen much of, feels like he's definitely going to get minutes. Maybe we'll get the return of Robbie Robinson. And then Lawson Sunderland, another guy who I think is going to be available for a depth piece if Julian Gressel's playing in the front three a lot. Not exactly the heavy hitters you're talking about, but still real professionals that you can feel like coming off the bench in an MLS game can hopefully hold their own. Let's talk about the defense. And I want to come back to that Vancouver game because I think it's a real blueprint. But before we do, I want to talk about the defense. They have gotten a lot better, seemingly, over the last 8 weeks or so since that Monterrey game. And then we had a really bad week against Atlanta and St. Louis City. Are you comfortable with them right now, or are you very worried, or is your worry more elsewhere on the pitch?
Yeah, we were doing really well until we went and lost to Atlanta 3-1. I am a little bit worried, man. Ever since we've lost Nico Freire, Christoph has stepped in, but there's been a few issues here and there. I know the defense has come under a lot of scrutiny, but that's definitely not our biggest concern going into this stretch of games. Um, Cello Wiegand has been performing decently well. He's been good in certain games. He's been average in other games, but I think he's been definitely solid. So no major complaints there. We've obviously got Jordi Alba, who's going to be absolutely fantastic in this stretch of games because we need his experience and his leadership skills. Franco Negri as backup is a really, really good option. So the fullbacks, I'm not too concerned about. Toto Aviles has been getting really good. I think he's been our best centre back this season. Consistently, he's performing at high levels. But the only concern from him is that there are certain instances in games where he loses his head a little bit and concedes certain unnecessary fouls or has a contribution that leads to a goal from the opposition team. So as long as he gets those one or two minor errors out of his game, I think Toto Aviles is solid as well. Christoph, again, I think he's been really good since he stepped in for Nico Freire. So overall, this backline has been decent and solid, and I think they're the least of our concerns.
Yeah, and probably now's a good time to remind everyone that this stretch of games will be without any additions. The first day of the new window is July 18th, so no one would be available until that July 20th game against the Chicago Fire. So this stretch is going to be with the guys we have and the guys that we've had. But I think the defense is solid, right? They've turned at least a little bit of a corner. I think the problem we saw over the last two games was more to do with the midfield than it was to do with the defense. And so let's go there. The one position that we do have a million players at is the midfield. But it doesn't feel like we've gotten the midfield right over the past couple games. And yet I'm scared that Tata is going to keep putting out the same midfield over and over until he feels like they're giving him what he wants from them.
What's the same midfield for you, though? Is it the Redondo, Busquets, and Kramaski combination?
So that's what we went with on. No, we went with Julian Gressel, Redondo, and Busquets against Atlanta, and then we took Gressel out and put in Matthias Rojas against St. Louis City. But Redondo and Busquets, I think, were responsible for doing a lot of the heavy lifting defensively, and I think that's where we fell apart and why we gave up 3 goals each game.
Yeah, there's definitely, I think, the biggest worry that we've been talking about, the biggest concern as we go into these next few games is what the midfield makeup is going to be. We've already pointed out that Gressel might be playing in the front line. I think 75%, I'm sure that, and that's not a big percentage, but I am quite positive that that's where Gressel is going to play. I think he's going to play on that right wing side. And I think that might be the better position for him anyways. So we might not get to see him play in the midfield as much, which leaves us with the options of Sergio Busquets, who picks himself, Federico Redondo, who picks himself if he's healthy, and then maybe David Ruiz, Benjamin Kramaski, Diego Gomez if he comes back, and Lawson Sunderland. Let's assume that Benjamin Kramaski is going to be in there. I'm not too, on paper, that midfield doesn't concern me too much, but from what I've seen from Redondo and Busquets in terms of how they play together, yeah, the paper hasn't been doing much work.
Do you want to have a quick conversation about Redondo and the midfield structure? Because that feels like it was a talking point around Inter Miami circles over this week or the last 10 days, maybe, whether we were being too harsh on Federico Redondo based on his performances coming off of injury, and maybe he looked really good in his first couple games, so that once he gets healthy and fully fit, we'll see that again. I don't know if you even saw this, but do you have any thoughts on that, or do you think that it was a little stylistic?
Yes, we are critical of Redondo, but it's not because of lack of understanding of him as a player. I think both you and I know that he can be a fantastic player when he gets going, and he's got skills for days. He could potentially be our best midfield option after Sergio Busquets. The issue that we had was his positioning and um, his role. That was, I don't know whether that was dictated by Tata Martino or the way he was playing next to Sergio Busquets and the effect he was having on the midfield. Now, that by no means is a harsh criticism, because we know he's a fantastic player, but he has to fix a few things here and there. Yes, that could be because he was a little bit tired coming out of an injury. Fatigue might play a role in that. Maybe is just playing next to some of these players, and those things could get fixed. And I completely agree, he needs a run of games before we start to actually judge him. But before all of that gets rectified, if you still play him and the problems persist, that means our midfield is potentially getting cooked again. So he has to fix up really, really quickly, because otherwise we're going to start losing games. And his role and that position that he plays is potentially a make or break for this Inter Miami team, and the effect that he has in this team. So that's why we're so critical.
Yeah, I don't want anyone to think that we think he's a bad player or
Not at
that
all.
he's not a really high quality or, I may in this podcast say I think we might want to start Yannick Bright over him, but that's not because I think that Yannick Bright is a more talented player than Redondo, only because I just wonder what the fit is really like, and I don't think it's there yet. And I also think that maybe we overestimated how good he was in his first couple games. Looking back on it, we weren't great defensively, and I think at the time we were blaming it being in a 3-5-2, or we thought our defense was really bad anyways, and we didn't really look at the midfield enough and think maybe they are playing great as a team or as a midfield, when maybe they weren't, even though Redondo, you can see the tools and skill set. So yeah, I just wanted to put that out there.
I want to
And
articulate one thing that I mentioned um, just now, and I want to put it in a certain way. So, yes, Redondo is a fantastic player. He needs game time and game rhythm to get back into form. He needs to play. But right now, these next stretch of games are not the time where Inter Miami as a team can wait for Federico Redondo to use those games to get better. And his position
or
dictates.
or is it the perfect time?
No, because I think the way we want results. And if the midfield is not functioning, we will not get the results. We don't have the firepower up top. We're not defensively too solid. So we need our midfield to be our controlling engine in these next stretch of games. So the way you want to make sure Federico Redondo gets ready over the next 2, 3, 4 games is make him come off the bench in the 60th minute. Because if he starts games and if he performs the way that he did in the last couple of games, this midfield is going to get cooked.
Yeah, I'm torn because I agree with the sense that we might not get the best results if he's starting every game, but I also don't know if you can guarantee that he can come on in the 60th minute, because I think that just depends on game state. But also, we're going to get 9 MLS games with Messi back in the fold. And I think if you look at the schedule, you're going to see 20, 22 plus points available in those 9 games. And so maybe you can kind of rough out a few bad results in order to get Redondo fit, so that when you get the big guns back for that final stretch after Leagues Cup, you can just rock and roll, and you're already going to be in the playoffs. And, even if you're not in the Supporter Shield race, you're still feeling comfortable about starting with a home leg. And I don't know. I
I
wonder if
guess
that's
it's,
a conversation that the coaching staff is having.
yeah, I think that's two different philosophies. I don't think either of them are wrong. It's just a matter of how we want to assimilate this player and what we think of these next few games, whether they're exercise to get the rest of the team better, or whether they're an exercise to try and accumulate as many points before our big guns show up. So it's just, I think, a matter of priorities.
For the record, I do think that's the wrong approach, but that's just my personal opinion. I do hope that they go out and try and win every game with the lineup that they feel is
Yeah.
most appropriate to do that. And that brings me to our last game without Messi and without Suárez and without Busquets, which was on the road across the continent at the Vancouver Whitecaps. And I thought that was the blueprint for what Inter Miami should do over these 5 or 6 games without these players. Do you think that was the ideal game plan for what we should go out to the next couple games? Because that was much more sit back, have a true 6, defend your back line, play deep with your back 4, and let some of your attacking players hit on the counter in space. Guys that are good in space, right? Kremaski, Robert Taylor, Leo Campana sort of led that effort as a goal scoring threat. And really, our defense stood really tall and was really stout in that game. The only reason they even scored 1 was because of a silly Toto Avila's foul away from the ball that just happened to be in the box. Is that the blueprint to you, or is there something else that Inter Miami should be doing? Because we are going to get Busquets back, and Busquets is going to play a lot. So what do you think?
I think for me, ideally, I love that style of play. I love good counter-attacking football. You can talk about keeping possession, you can talk about knocking it around, but good counter-attacking football can win you Champions League, as Real Madrid proved. For me, I don't think we have enough quality to play a possession style of football without Sergio Busquets in there, without Lionel Messi, without Luis Suarez. In fact, we do try to play possession football.
We are going to have Busquets, right? So it is a little different.
Yeah, exactly. So the fact that Busquets is in there might warrant us to continue playing the same way, and we might, continue to with the same tactics that we've always been with, dominating the possession, holding the ball well, and then finding the intricate passes to try and get past the defense. I think the best play style for this particular team is the blueprint against Vancouver. I would do that 100 times over for the next 6 games to try and get a result out, because we've got the players to catch teams on the break. We've got the athleticism in some of the young players that we have to be able to run to the spaces and create chances off the counter, catch the opposition on transition. But what we don't have is a defense solid enough to play a high line and to push our back 4 up and try and dominate the game from the front. So in the absence of such a solid defense and a little bit of an iffy midfield, I would 100% try and be a little bit more mid-block, low block, solid, and then catch teams on the counter.
I'm going to tell you what the starting lineup was for that game, because I think that there's a real way you can just sort of, export and import. But I don't think this is what Tata's going to do. But tell me if this is what you would do. That front 3 was Taylor, Campana, and Matías Rojas. Move Gressel up to right wing. And then you take that midfield was Kremaski, Yannick Bright, and Gressel. So you move Gressel out to the right wing and you input Sergio Busquets. So you have a midfield of Kremaski, Yannick Bright, and Busquets. And then the same back 5 in terms of the back 4 and the goalkeeper. That is what I would do a lot. But I also think that Tata Martino and the coaching staff are really going to try and force Federico Redondo into the midfield. And if you want to have that really solid defensive presence in Yannick Bright, plus the quality on the ball in Busquets, plus that athletic runner in the midfield in a Benjamin Kremaski or David Ruiz, there's not a ton of space. And I don't know if it's a great structural fit to put Federico Redondo into that midfield. At least from what we've seen from Redondo so far, right? He's, I've always said that he's going to evolve to figure out what his role in this team is. But at least for Saturday night against Philadelphia, that feels like a really winning strategy, especially on the road.
Yeah, and the more I think about it, the more I would go with the pivot of Yannick Bright and Benjamin Kremaski. Yannick Bright and Sergio Busquets. I think we have to play them as much as we can together. And then maybe have Kremaski, Redondo, Sunderland, others switch in and out of that position. So I don't know how Redondo will look next to someone like a solid 6 in Yannick Bright. I don't think that's what Tata Martino sees as our midfield structure. But that would be the only way that I would see accommodating Redondo in this midfield structure. I think if you put him in with Kremaski and Sergio Busquets, there's not enough defensive discipline in those 3 players together to be able to grind out a result. So I think Yannick Bright has to be in there.
Again, the reason I brought up this Federico Redondo conversation is because I don't want anyone to think that we think he's a bad player or he won't be good once he figures out his role. But at least for Saturday night against Philadelphia, we haven't seen him do that role yet in any of his games so far at Inter Miami. And I do think that that could be something that costs us points, right, in a very winnable game against a Philadelphia team that's a little down right now. Let's get into the schedule because we haven't really talked about it yet, and it's actually very relevant to this entire conversation. The final for Copa America is July 14th, and the third place game is July 13th. So everyone there will definitely miss the next 5 games, and that's June 15th, Saturday, against the Philadelphia Union, next Wednesday against the Columbus Crew, June 29th against Nashville, July 3rd against Charlotte, and July 6th against FC Cincinnati. A couple of real doozies in there, but also a couple of very winnable games. Back-to-back-to-back road games in there as well. But if one of our players makes it all the way to the final of the Copa America or the third place game, so really if they make it to the semifinals, there's a very good chance they'll miss that July 17th game, which is against Toronto, which would be 3 or 4 days after that final. And then July 20th, we play Chicago Fire at home. Depending on how much they played in the Copa America, right? If you're thinking about a guy like Messi, who is likely to play 90 minutes every game and his team has a tremendous chance to make the final, you can see how he could miss up to 7 games. Let's start with the Philadelphia Union. They are struggling. They're sort of right around the playoff line. I think right now they're in 9th. But they're not the typical, they're in 8th right now, but they're not the typical Philadelphia Union team we've seen in the past that's just always in the top 3. Without star players, they just get it done with chemistry and solidity all the way around. It feels like this is a very winnable game, right? Even without the guys that we're going to be missing. What do you think?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, again, I would consider every single game that Inter Miami plays to be a winnable game. Obviously, I'll have to look into Philadelphia a little bit to understand their play style and what they're going to put out there. But on paper, we're only going to be missing Luis Suarez and Lionel Messi. If I look at the Vancouver game and the lineup that we put out, you're adding quality in the midfield by putting in Sergio Busquets, maybe taking away some of the stability in terms of chemistry. But if you've got Julian Gresso on the right wing side, who can maybe come back and help in defense a little bit, I still think it's a winnable game. I think it's very much like that Vancouver game where we should go out and try and get all 3 points, even away from home.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And that's why I think starting a lineup that is going to make sure you give up as few goals as possible is the way to go. Because even though Robert Taylor and Campana are not Messi and Suarez, I think you can still trust them to get out on the counter and be effective in open spaces and try and create goals. I will say we'll probably be without Benjamin Kramaski for that game, and we'll definitely be without David Ruiz because of international duty. Kramaski played with the Olympic team on Wednesday, so he probably won't be available for us on Saturday. So that's an interesting midfield, right? You might get Yannick Bright, Redondo, and Sergio Busquets in one midfield, especially if we see Gressel go out right to the right.
Yeah, the midfield that I've been screaming for. And you know what? It might be a blessing in disguise, because if that works out, then you potentially found a place for Redondo on this team. And if Kramaski comes back, maybe it gives Redondo confidence to try and play a little bit the way we need him to play to position himself. And then after that, we might have a few options in the midfield that we can experiment with. But if the Yannick Bright, Busquets, and Redondo midfield works out, I think that's going to be really, really helpful in terms of choosing the options going forward. I will say, in the last 10 games, Philadelphia has won 1 and drawn 5. So we don't want to be that another W on their match list.
Yeah, and they started off better than they've been relatively poor lately by their standards. Julian Carranza, who's their star number 9, is both injured and also on the verge of making a move to, I believe, the Eredivisie. So it's there for the taking. I don't think they've scored a lot of goals lately. It should be a game that we can go in there and feel like we can go get a W. I believe we got a result there last year. Let me just check on that. But I guess that was a different team, so maybe that's irrelevant for this conversation. Let's go to game 2, which is next Wednesday, and this is a game that I think was on a lot of people's sort of most exciting games of the season 6 months ago, and it might not be after all. We play the Columbus Crew at Chase Stadium Wednesday. First thought on that one?
Probably going to lose. I'd be happy with a draw.
By the way, we lost 4-1 to Philadelphia on the road last year. So thank God it's a new team.
I promise we know our history, guys. I promise we know our Inter Miami history well. But thank God it's not the same set of players for sure.
Yeah, new set of players. The Columbus Crew coming off the CONCACAF Champions Cup final. I will say, I know a lot of people think that teams finish that tournament and then they start to make a run, and that's exactly what Inter Miami did. But for teams that go very deep in the tournament, like the final, I do think there's a little bit of a period, even after that, where they're sort of recovering from, that tournament and playing twice a week and stuff. So I still don't know if at this point they'll have recovered, although having this nice 2-week break probably helps. But really, to me, the biggest thing is that Aiden Morris news, that there's a very good chance he doesn't play in that game. He was with the Olympic team, but I imagine he's on his way to England now to finalize that move to Middlesbrough. And they can't replace him for, like we said, until just over a month from now. That is going to affect their midfield in a way that I think makes them significantly less dangerous than, even when we had that conversation over the weekend of why we thought the Columbus Crew were so dangerous. They do have very pacey players. And so I think getting into a situation where you allow the midfield to get very spread out is not really what you want. But again, I think it's the same blueprint. Sit back, be very disciplined defensively, and put out a lineup that is going to naturally do that, right? Don't put out 3 aggressive attacking midfielders and then just tell them to be defensive. Put out a defensive midfielder that's actually going to be disciplined, because that's what his game is. Is that the blueprint? I know it's a home game and the Columbus Crew are very good, but it is a home game. And I think you have to at least try to go out and get 3 points because it's at home.
Yeah, 100%. This is not a team that you want to play around football with. You can't go toe to toe with this team in terms of possession. Columbus is great at playing around you. And regardless of what team we put out, even if it's a low block team that's defensively solid, they still might find a way through. So you have to be really, really completely in full concentration for the 90 minutes against a team like Columbus. And I think that's going to be a really good test for this team and for the youngsters to try and grind a result out. But in terms of what the blueprint has to be, I think 100% have players who can defend solid. It might be actually a blessing in disguise to have someone like Campana, Robert Taylor, and Julian Gressel as a front 3 instead of Messi and Suárez, because they're going to press from the front. They're going to be a lot more involved in the defensive structure of this team. So we may actually, might turn out that we can get a result out of this.
By the way, I'll just say, I think that type of game plan with Julian Gressel as a right winger might be the ideal spot for him. And I think he might have his best run of form of the season if we actually do if we set up in the way that we kind of imagine might happen.
Also, then we Campana in there, nodding those headers in is the perfect recipe for Julian Gressel.
I think we might see a little bit more out of Cello Wigan also. And then, of course, Jordi Alba to Leo Campana. Even Inter Miami's Twitter account posted, or social media account posted, a video of them connecting earlier this week. And so I think that might be a real connection we see. Moving forward, we have back-to-back road games after a 10-day break after that Columbus Crew game. We go on the road to Nashville. Like I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the episode, it sounds like they're about to hire BJ Callahan, who's an assistant coach for the U.S. men's national team. Good coach. We've only seen him coach a handful of games for the U.S. men's national team, but he was better than the guy that came before him and the guy that came after him. And a lot of U.S. men's national team fans wishes he was just the coach. But if he does take over Nashville, he could be in charge for that game. Maybe he's going to wait till after the Copa America to leave. But If he is, they could play an entirely different style than we've seen. And he's a guy that just sets them up in a way to get the most out of their players. He's not, at least from what we've seen, not a stylistic guy. And they could get a new manager bounce, and that could be a dangerous game, especially on the road.
I hate the new manager bounce, man. I hate it when it's against my own team. And this is going to be one of those games where I'm just going to be like, please, Nashville, show up with every player thinking they know what they need to do, but then everyone running around like headless chickens, because this is going to be one of those harsh games. We know every game against Nashville is annoying, it's frustrating, and it takes a toll. So, one of those games where you're just going to have to go and hope and pray that we're able to get something out of it, because it's a bit of an unknown question mark as to what kind of Nashville we're going to see.
Yeah, and we went to Geodis Park earlier in the season, and we got beat up a little bit, right? We kind of got lucky to escape with a 2-2 draw. That game very easily could have been 3-1, and we could have had a lot of work to do in the home leg of that Champions Cup tie. Then that Wednesday, that's another busy week, 3 games in 8 days type of week. We play Charlotte at Bank of America Stadium. We haven't seen them yet. They have been getting results. They're actually doing relatively well. They're 5th in the table right now, but they have not scored a lot of goals. They've played very defensively. 18 goals scored, 18 goals allowed in 17 games. So one of the lowest goal scoring marks in the league, but also one of the best goals allowed marks. That feels like a 0-0 draw, and just sort of sit back and make sure you don't lose the game, especially on the road, right?
The more I think about it, the more I feel like we're losing a lot of points here, man. There are a lot of games where we don't know what the outcome's going to be. Because when we did this last time, I mean, of course, but when we did this last time, we kind of were confident, okay, going into this game, I think we'll be fine. I think we're going to win. Same with the second, third, fourth game, fifth game, and we went on a really good run. This time around, it just feels like, yeah, if we get a draw away from home, I'll be happy. There's going to be a few tough ones, and Charlotte's going to be another one of those. They haven't lost a game. They lost 1 game in the last 7 and have won 4. So, yeah, it's going to be. You said we're playing them in the Wednesday, right?
Yeah.
On the Wednesday, yeah. So another factor that we need to take into account is the number of games that we'll be playing back and forth, and fatigue might be a really big issue given that we are a little bit short-handed both in the midfield and up front, and then don't even talk about the defense.
Yeah. I think this team at full strength is the best team in MLS history, at least on paper. I think even if you take Messi out, it's arguably the best team in the league. But when you take Suárez out as well, and when you take Matías Rojas out, you get a few of the same problems we had back in that sort of run where we were really low because of injuries. We don't have a lot of forward players, right? You're going to rely on a guy like Schneider Borgelin to give you minutes. You're going to rely on Leo Afonso to give you minutes. And then also, I'm less confident about our midfield structure than I have been in a very long time. Maybe Diego Gomez comes back and makes me feel a lot better about it. Maybe Tata Martino shows a lot of faith in Yannick Bright and he gets a lot of minutes, and that would make me feel feel great about it. But it does feel like when you say, I don't know how confident I am for these games, that's what being a normal team in the MLS is like. But also, I think it means that you need your coaching to set you up in a way that gets you results. And maybe the fact that we're not confident shows a lack of trust in our coaching staff to do that. It's going to be a big, 5 or 6 games for Tata Martino to make sure he gets it right on a consistent basis, or we could have a really bad time. And here's the frustrating part. If we do have a bad time, I think it's going to be because of Tata Martino and who he's chosen and what tactics he's set up with. But people are going to talk about Lionel Messi and how Inter Miami can't function without him. And I think that will be unfair to the players that are, still here.
That's actually a really, really good point, because thus far, yes, there's a lack of trust in Tata Martino and the coaching staff, but that's primarily because it's been such a seesaw season for them. Some games, Tata Martino has had a 10 out of 10 performance, has shown his ability to adapt in games, has shown the ability to put on the right starting lineup, play players in positions that will get the right result. And then there's been games where he's absolutely just, for lack of a better word, ruined the game by the players that he's chosen or substitutions that he's made or tactics that he's picked. So we don't really know what to expect from Tata Martino. We don't really know whether he's going to be able to pick the right lineup or whether he'll make the right decision. And it's such a seesaw. So yeah, and this is the perfect test to see where the coaching staff stands, because they don't have Lionel Messi or Luis Suarez to build them out anymore.
Yeah, and I don't want to drill on Tata Martino too much because I think all of his decisions lately have been at least understandable. You can see what he was thinking.
Yeah.
And so whether it works out or not, it's hard, it's easy to criticize after the fact. But now he's going to have to try and win games for his team in a way that maybe he hasn't had to because he's been able to rely on, superstars and overwhelming talent. Moving forward to the second really interesting game is that final of the 3 road games in 1 week, right? We're just going to be traveling to Nashville and then straight to Charlotte and then straight to Cincinnati. That Saturday, July 6th, we're going to be playing at Cincinnati. That team's going to be basically full strength. I don't think they have significant departures for the international competitions. It's going to be on the road at a team that's in tremendous form. And if we're not getting results over the next 4 games before then, they could be the top of the table in the entire MLS. Are we going to just lose 4-0 or what can we do in that game?
Try not to lose 4-0. This one's I'm fairly confident in our ability to not get a result. I'll be very, very happy if we get something out of this game because, I don't expect us to win this game. A full-strength Cincinnati team is going to be really, really difficult to beat with our full-strength Inter Miami team. So when we're, half the strength, having traveled so much in the last few games, this game couldn't have come at a worse time for us.
Yeah, and depending on the results we get up until that game, our confidence could be in very different places. But it feels like right now that's a game where if you get a point, you feel like you got 3. Okay, and then the last 2 games are potential of this streak, right? We might get everyone back after that game, especially if there's some early exits. I think there's a very good chance we have both Matias Rojas and Suárez back. I think Messi's the least likely to be back for that July 17th game against Toronto, but we're back at home. We're against a Toronto team that has some good attacking players, but as a team, I don't know how talented they are. And then Chicago, it's sort of the same thing. Chicago's significantly worse, and they're just a dumpster fire. But those 2 games feel like we can get a 6 points even without Lionel Messi. Do you agree, or are you thinking it might be a struggle?
Yeah, I'm just trying to do the math of how many points we're going to win over the course of the next 7 games, because I know that's the question you're going to ask me next. But we've already beaten Vancouver in Canada. We haven't played Toronto, but I think we can definitely beat them. And then Chicago, as you said, dumpster fire. So winnable games. I think by that time we would have an understanding of where this team stands. The chemistry should be in place. And maybe, just maybe, if we can eke out a result against Cincinnati, that just give us the boost to go out and absolutely smash the next 2 teams. So a lot rides on the first few results as to how we're going to end the next few games.
Yeah, I will say there are a couple resets in this window, right? We're going to play these next 2 games over the next week against the Philadelphia Union and the Columbus Crew. And then we're going to have a 10-day break. So it will feel like 3 separate sections of this little bit of schedule. After that 10-day break, we have 3 back-to-back road games and then another 11-day break before that Toronto and Chicago home game. So while we're in the moment, it's going to feel like 3 separate sections. And so hopefully if results don't go our way in a certain one, the team can use that opportunity to reset and sort of come back out for the next set in a way that's, more productive. So what did you add up? What are your expectations? Give me your best case scenario, right? Or like best realistic case scenario.
So I would say out of those 7 games, 3 of them are very much winnable. Very much where we're the team that's,
What are those 3?
So I would say Philadelphia, we should win. Toronto, we should win. And then Chicago, we should win. So that's 9 points, right?
Yeah.
I think we can beat Nashville just because they're Nashville. And I don't think they're going to be as good under a new coach immediately as they would maybe 5-6 games once they've settled in. So that's a game where we can go out and get a result. So let's make that 12 points. And then I think we draw against Cincinnati too. So 13 points. At minimum, that's the worst case scenario. We need 13 points
What
out of
about
these
Columbus?
21. I don't think we win against Columbus.
You think that's the worst case scenario?
I think 13 is the worst case scenario. We need to get at least 13 points out of these 7.
You have so much faith. My goodness.
There you go. Of course, I believe in my boys, man. Come on, look at that. Look at what Anton's saying. 13 points. Okay, it's not the worst case scenario, but it's the least of what I would expect out of this team. We've got the quality to go out and get those results. 13 is the least that we can do.
You know, there's a world where we get like 3 points from this.
True.
Or at least the next
No, that's
5
your
games.
pessimistic world where you live in absolute misery and you've not been an Inter Miami fan. But when you've been an Inter Miami fan flying high, we can get all 21 points for all I care.
Well, this is the truth. I'm going to talk myself in pregame into thinking we're going to win every single one of them. But just looking at the schedule in advance. No, but I agree with you. I think getting, what is it, seven games. I think there's 4 or 5 wins potentially in there. And so if you can, the more of those wins that you actually accumulate, the better off you're going to feel, the better off we're going to feel, and the better position you're going to be in. And so I do think there's 16, 17 points in a best case realistic scenario if the guys are really firing. And I do think those last 2 games, Toronto and Chicago Fire, we will have Suárez back and we will have Matías Rojas back. So it'll just be Messi-less. And I think we're going to go get 6 points there. So I don't think less than like 8 or 9 points is really realistic. And I'm excited to see what this team can do, though. I think that's the Inter Miami fan in me really wants to see Leo Campana go on for like 5 or 6 goals over this next little bit. I want to see Robert Taylor get 3 assists. I want to see Yannick Bright. I want to see Robbie Robinson come back from injury. I want to see Ian Frey come back. I want to see Noah Allen get some minutes. We haven't seen him in quite a long time. And I think they're all going to have a role to play. And I think Tata's going to have to be the sort of puppet master playing the right strings or the piano master playing the right tune, because he's got the talent on the roster. It's there. It really is. It's still a good MLS roster without Messi, Suárez, and Matías Rojas. It's a little thin offensively, but still it's a good roster. Like a really good roster. Top 7, 6, 5 roster in the league.
Say it one more time for the fans at the back of the stands. It's a really good roster, guys. And we can actually win these games. Like we can. We genuinely can.
So maybe I'm just not, I don't have a lot of faith in Tata. Maybe that's what this all comes down to. And I don't think that's the case. I think Tata has the ability to make this work for us. But can he play the right tunes at the right time? And listen, it's not easy. And professional coaches, only the best are good at it at all the time and all season. So, but it's there for us, and I like it. I want it to go really well so badly.
Yeah, it's much easier to talk from the comfort of our sofas and in front of a mic where there's not much consequences involved. That being said, I think, and this is how I predict this happening. I think the first 3 games are when we're still going to be struggling a little bit. We might get a result against Philadelphia or Nashville, but the first 3 games are going to be a little bit of an issue. I think we might just get 1 point out of that. But after that, once we figure out the lineup, I have a feeling, and call this fool's dream, we go out and beat Cincinnati. And that's where we're yes, this team is capable of doing anything and everything that we've contemplated thus far. If we win against Cincinnati, okay, here's a question for you. If we win against Cincinnati and we only get 13 points, but we beat Cincinnati without any of our star players, would you feel good about this run? If we get less than,
I would feel good with 13.
Points.
I would feel good with 13 points regardless of what happens in any game. No, I mean, here's the thing. Cincinnati's in tremendous form right now. I know they lost their last game to Nashville, but before that, they had won like 7 or 8 straight. The reason we didn't talk about that game in as much specificity as we did against Philadelphia and to a lesser extent Columbus is because they're going to play 5 games and they might not be in the same form, right? They could go 2 wins, 2 draws, and a loss, or 1 win, 2 draws, and 2 losses over the next 5 games, and all of a sudden that game doesn't feel quite as intimidating. So I'm sort of hesitant to put any expectations on that specific game until we get a little bit closer, because who knows where they will be. And it is the sort of mantra of MLS teams to be very good and then not so good, and then very good and then not so good. Very rarely do teams just continue winning forever and ever. This isn't that type of league. I want to do a little back and forth in terms of things we need to see / want to see, and not in terms of, we talked about the games and what we hope to see in terms of the results, but on the field, things you really want to see from the players, from the coaching staff, maybe a player taking a step up, maybe Tata Martino making a specific decision consistently. And let's just kind of go back and forth and give things that we would really want to or need to see to feel good about this stretch.
Julian Gressel needs to step up. I think that's a big need because a lot of responsibility falls on his shoulders. We're going to see him. He's going to play. I think he's going to play in the right wing position. I think that's his better position compared to when he plays in the midfield, and he needs to perform there. This is the perfect case scenario for him. The big guns are out. The expectations of playing next to them are sort of, under the table now, and he needs to take the reins and take charge. So that's a big, big need for me.
Yeah, I think the final decision on Matías Rojas is going to play a huge factor in what Julian Gressel's role is going to be, but it's going to be a role. He's going to have a real role. He's going to be a starter for probably all of these games. Maybe he'll get one off when we go back to back in a week. But I do think that if we play a stylistic system where we sit back and then we create space in front of us so that Julian Gressel can get on the ball in space, sort of with the defenders playing back, back to like running back to their own goal, and Robert Taylor and Leo Capana making runs, and maybe Benjamin Karmaski, with Julian Gressel having the ability and time and space on the ball to put in good passes, to be creative and create dangerous situations. I think that's where he's going to be at his best. And I think that that's what I would do. And so I want to see Tata Martino do that. I'm not 100% convinced that's what's going to happen, but I agree. If that is what's going to happen, Julian Gressel needs to step up and show why we're paying him as much money as we are. I want to see Yannick Bright. Tata Martino has given him 1 start, and I thought he was phenomenal against Vancouver, especially considering it was his first professional start. The next week, he played for the B team by design, and so he wasn't available for the A team. I don't know what that was about. I know someone in the chat said maybe Tata Martino doesn't trust him, but he needs to learn to trust him, because he is a unique player on this team in terms of what his skill set is, when he is stylistically. And that's a skill set I think you really need when you don't have a guaranteed 2 or 3 goals a game from, Messi and Suárez. So that's something I really want to see. That's something I need to see, or I will be very frustrated.
Nah, that was my next point as well. I want to see Yannick Bright start more games and have a bigger role over the next 7 games than he's had over the last few. He's proved himself in games that he's been put in. He's consistently been brought on in the second half to do a role, which he's done really well. That Vancouver game was absolutely fantastic. I think he was a key key reason why we won that game. So 100% agree. That is a player that can have a very, very big impact on results in the coming games, and he needs to start.
All right, give me another one.
I'm thinking. I want us to play based on the needs of the opposition and not just willy-nilly pick up the same starting 11 every single game just because. I think it needs to be a lot more tailored to the opposition that we're playing, a lot more tailored to the conditions. That does mean less consistency in the starting 11 that we pick, but this is the next stretch of games where we need to be a little bit more tactically flexible.
Yeah, and that's a Tata Martino thing, right? Conversation. We aren't going to be so good that we can just dictate style of play based on our talent levels. And so you want to see us adjust to what the game demands and what the opposition demands. So I'm with you 100%. I think this is going to be a real opportunity for Tata Martino. I think this is going to be the best opportunity Tata Martino will have over the course of his Inter Miami career, assuming he doesn't stay for the next 5 years or whatever. This will be his best opportunity to show his tactical ability over these next 5 or 6 games, because he's always going to have a hugely talented roster over the next year and a half. And, you know, I don't know how long he's going to stay after that, but as long as Messi's on this team, he's going to have a talent advantage. And so this is the opportunity to prove himself as a tactician. And I don't know a lot of people that feel like that's Tata Martino's strength. So this is his opportunity. I need to see Leo Campana be a star for this team. Last season, he had one stretch where he was a star, and that came right at the beginning of international duty when Messi got injured. And so he wasn't able to really have that stretch with Messi. So I don't think it got the same amount of sort of publicity, but he scored 2 goals against Cincinnati in the U.S. Open Cup semifinal. He scored against LAFC. He scored 2 goals. He had a brace in back-to-back games, I think, against Sporting Kansas City and Atlanta United. And he's the reason we won that Sporting Kansas City game when we had a lot of guys on international duty. He's capable of having a stretch of 3, 4, 5, 6 games where he is the man. Like he has the ability to make us forget about Luis Suárez for a few games. And if he can have one of those right now, it would be awesome. It would be the perfect time for it. And if he does that, he'll break the all-time Inter Miami record. And he just might be able to get himself high enough up that list so that Messi can't catch him for the rest of this season. Though obviously Messi will definitely pass him at some point in the next 12 months. But it would be really cool for him to have that record. And if he can get himself 5 or 6 or 7 goals over the next month and a half, he would be in a really good spot.
There are 2 things. This team doesn't play well if Campana doesn't play well over the next 7 games. Yes, he needs to score, but he also needs to contribute in terms of, you know, the assists and playmaking and pressing and all of that, but primarily score. If he doesn't play well, then we're not going to play too well. Secondly, we need to get him the service. We need to make sure that we make him that target man. He has to be the person that we rely on and give him that responsibility, because yes, he is the sole number 9 that we have until Suárez comes back, but we also have to create chances for him. So I think those 2 factors are going to be really, really important in terms of how we play offensively and if we're able to create chances or not. But I trust him. I think he's going to be great.
Yeah, him and Robert Taylor are going to be the goal scorers, right?
Yep.
You know, maybe you get Kramaski running out of the midfield. Maybe you get
Julian Gressel with a hat trick against Columbus.
Yeah, if Julian Gressel can put the ball on target, I'll be happy. Yeah, I mean, I just don't see a lot of goals from this team. Maybe you get a Schneider Borgelin goal late or something. Leo Alfonso might score. I don't know, but it feels like it's going to be. And then if Robbie Robinson does come back, that changes everything for this team. No, I'm just kidding. But he could be a guy that could score a goal or 2. But
we don't
really,
even need
Robert
Messi
Taylor,
if Robbie Robinson's back.
Robert Taylor and Leo Campana need to be the goal scoring threats. So, yeah. Okay. Give me another one.
The midfield balance. I want/need for the midfield balance to be correct, because if it's not, and this is, I think, tied to Yannick Bright playing, this is tied to Julian Gressel performing well. But if we don't get that midfield balance and chemistry right, we're not going to win any game. So Tata Martino, please, please, please make the right decision in terms of who you pick in that midfield. Don't make it just because of talent. Make it what's best for this team in terms of the chemistry in the midfield, because everything's going to flow from there. The back line is going to look a lot better and the front line is going to look a lot better.
Yeah, that's for my own mental health. I need that, because if not, I'm going to come every single game in the post-game show and just scream at Tata Martino, because it's there, but also you can see how he's could and why he might get it wrong. and I can just foresee it happening, and it's going to make me so frustrated.
It's also a lot more enjoyable when the midfield is well balanced and
Yeah.
everything's functioning in the midfield, because then you can focus on other areas of the pitch. Because I feel like when we talk about Inter Miami, a lot of times the discussion is about how bad we were in the midfield. And I want to talk about something else now.
Well, and you know, the defense is solid but not spectacular in terms of
Yeah,
individual
it's a
talent.
given fact.
And you know with this front three, it's going to be solid but not spectacular in terms of individual talent. And so you want your midfield to be set up in a way that makes the offense better and makes the defense better. And the midfield is the one place where we're not losing anyone. We have all of our available players, all of the available talent. This is the deepest, most talented midfield room in the MLS. And so just about getting the balance right and the chemistry right. And so I agree. I think that's really good. I only have one more. And so I don't know if you want to, how many more you have, but I think Jordi Alba has a big role to play. And I want to see him be the star. There's no reason there's nobody else on the field that's got his gravitas. I know Busquets is also sort of in the same status, but he's a little bit more downplayed, calmer, right? But I think Jordi Alba is the guy that can take the game, in a phrase you like, by the scruff of the neck, and sort of create. He can make the game in a way that few others can, and I want to see him do that, especially in the big games. I want to see him play really well. So yeah, those are some of the things that I really want to see.
He has to be the leader. I think in the back line, in the midfield, he needs to tie everything together. And I completely agree with you. More than capable of doing it in every single game, for sure. But now that the responsibility is on his shoulders, I want to see that. Yeah, I agree with you.
Any more for us, or does that kind of cover
And I
everything you
think
want to see?
we've covered quite a few areas of the pitch, and I think we are quite certain on what we want to see and what we hope to see. And I hope that comes to fruition.
I just want to go back to the chat and see if I missed anything. I think we're going to play better on defense without Messi and Suárez because we're not going to play the same game style. This is a conversation we've had a lot over this podcast, but do you think we're actually going to see a different play style from Tata, or do you think we're just going to try and keep the same system so that when we bring in the other pieces back, everyone's sort of fluent with what they're doing?
I don't know, man. At this point, I've stopped predicting what Tata Martino is going to do, because every time I think he's going to do one thing, he does the exact opposite. Honestly, my gut instinct is that yes, Tata Martino is going to adapt a little bit, because okay, I'm not saying we're going to lose 7 games, but there's a high possibility that we lose a majority of the next few games. And we get 6, 7 points out of possible 21. That will happen if we play the same play style as without Messi, and then hope that once Messi comes back, we can slot right back into the way we used to play. I think the best way to get the most out of these next few games is by experimenting a little bit, trying new things, trying different play styles, and making sure everyone is pulling in the right direction and everyone can contribute, and you set them in the right direction to contribute. And losing 16 points out of 21, 15 points out of 21 is going to be bad for morale, for confidence, for the conversation around. So he wants to win games. He should want to win games, and he should want to get the points. And I hope it's going to be that he adapts and changes play styles accordingly.
Yeah, I had one other thing I wanted to talk about tonight, and that is sort of where this team might be coming out of this stretch when Messi does return and Suárez and Rojas, but mostly Messi. If we don't have a good run of games here, everyone's going to say it's all about Messi and those, everyone coming back with this record of what Inter Miami's record's like without Messi, which a lot of it was last season, right? Or games we were heavily rotating or whatever. But this team, if they do really well, can establish themselves as, hey, even without Messi, we're the best team in the league, or we're right there. So once you add Messi and Suárez, we are obviously the best team, and everyone else should fear us. And that could be like a real confidence going into the Leagues Cup, where we're going to play games as long as we're in the tournament. back to back to back to back to back every 3 days, we're going to need the whole roster, including a lot of guys that are going to play over these next 5 games, to step up and be very effective. And I know by that point we might bring in some new players, but from a league-wide perspective, we can make a real statement with a positive run of games over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's going to do a world of good for our confidence and for the conversation and the rhetoric online and what the image of this team is if we can perform well over the next few games. So hopefully.
All right, Saur, that's all I got. You have anything else before we wrap it up?
No, man, let's just get behind the team. I know it's going to be a little bit of a bumpy ride and it's going to take some time for us to get back into rhythm and get kicked into all 6 gears, but I have full faith in this team. I know we're going to be a lot nervous when we have the pregame podcast again on Saturday, which is finally, after a while, it feels like an eternity since we've played. But nervousness can be good sometimes, and hopefully we can get a few good results.
Yeah. We're going to cut this one off 15 minutes early because Saur and I are going to go record an episode of The Heartbeat. We're going to be talking about what it means for Lionel Messi to say that Inter Miami is going to be his last club. We're going to talk about Rafael Varane and if Inter Miami has any chance of making that happen, and if they do, what it would look like. So I encourage you guys to check that out. It's called The Heartbeat. It's a daily 20-minute podcast on Inter Miami. Comes out every day in the morning. And so we will, this episode that we're about to record will come out tomorrow morning. I encourage you all to check it out. And then as for us at the Dry Pink Dialogue, we will be back Saturday, an hour before kickoff, as we always do, the pregame show. If you're listening to this on a podcast app, just know that that's only on YouTube. And I encourage you all to check it out because it's a lot of fun. It's a great way for just getting your nerves out in the last hour before kickoff, getting into Inter Miami, and just sort of zoning in on the game. And that's always a lot of fun. We will be back then. And other than that, I'm Scotty. This was Saur. We will see you guys next time. Have a wonderful night.